Reading Bhagavatam?
Bhagavatam, yes.
Do you like me to give out volumes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Let's do that.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. May 25th, 2025. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Part 1. This is Chapter 7, Text 42. 3.7.42. 3.7.42. Canto 3, Chapter 7, Text 42. All right. So first we'll do each word, or each section of words, let's say. Shri Sukha Uvacha Sa Idam Aprista Purana Kalpa Guru Pradanena Muni Pradana Pravidra Harsho Bhagavat Katayam Sanchodita Tam Prahasan Ivaha. Okay, now we'll do the line by line. Shri Sukha Uvacha Saitam Aprista Purana Kalpa Guru Pradanena Muni Pradana Pravidra Harsho Bhagavat Katayam Sanchoditastam Prahasan Nivaha Shri Sukha Uvacha Saitam Aprista Purana Kalpa Guru Pradanena Muni Pradana Pravidra Harsho Bhagavat Katayam Sanchoditastam Prahasan Nivaha Shri Sukha Uvacha Saitam Aprista Purana Kalpa Guru Pradanena Muni Pradana Pravidra Harsho Bhagavat Katayam Sanjoditastam Prahasan Ivaha
Shri Sukha Uvacha
Shri Sukha Uvacha
Saitama Krishna Purana Kalpa
Krishna Purana Kalpa
Pradhanena Muni Pradhana.
Guru Pradhanena Muni Pradhana.
Pravida Harsho Bhagavat Katayam.
Pravida Harsho Bhagavat Katayam.
Sanchoditas Tam Prasantivaha.
Sanjoditastam Prasanivaha. Shri Sukavacha. Saidam Aprista Purana Kalpa. Guru Pradhanena Muni Pradhana. Pravida Harsho Bhagavat Katayam. Sanjoditastam Prasanivaha. Shri Sukha Uvacha.
Saidam Aprishta Purana Kalpa.
Saidam Aprista Purana Kalpa.
Guru Parana Muna Padana.
Guru Pradhanena Muni Pradhana.
Pada Harsu Bhagavat Katayam.
Praveda Harsho Bhagavat Katayam.
Sankoditas Tam Prahasan Avacha Avaha.
Sanjoditastam Prahasanaviha. Shri Sukha Uvacha.
Saidam Aprishta Purana Kalpa.
Saidam Aprista Purana Kalpa.
Pradena Muni Pradhana.
Guru Pradhanena Muni Pradhana.
Artha Harso Bhagavatka Dayam.
Praveda Harsho Bhagavat Katayam.
Sankoditas Tam Prahasan Vivaha.
Sanjoditastam Prahasanivaha. Anyone else in person or online like to chant the verse?
Shri Shuka Uvacha
Sukha Uvacha.
Sa Itam Aprishta Purana Kalpaha
Saidam Prishta Purana Kalpa.
Guru Pradhanena Muni Pradhanaha
Guru Pradhanena Muni Pradhana.
Ravridra Harsho Bhagavat Katayam
Pravida Harsho Bhagavat Katayam.
Sanchoditastam Prasanivaha
Sanjoditastam Prahasanivaha.
Sri Sukha Uvacha.
Shri Sukha Uvacha.
Saitama Prishta Purana Kalpa.
Saidam Trisha Purana Kalpa.
Kuru Pradhanena Muni Pradhana.
Guru Pradhanena Muni Pradhana.
Pravrida Harsho Bhagavat Katayam.
Praveda Harsho Bhagavat Katayam.
Sanchoditastam Prahasan Ivaha.
Sanchoditastam Prahasan Ivaha. Now we'll do word for word translation. Shri Sukha Vacha.
Shri Sukha Vacha.
Shri Sukadev Goswami said,
Shri Sukadeva Goswami said,
Sa
Sa
He Itam
Itam
Thus
Thus
Abrista
Abrista
being questioned.
Question
Purana Kalpa,
Purana
one who knows how to explain the supplements of the Vedas.
One knows how to explain supplements of Vedas,
The Puranas.
the Puranas,
Kuru Pradhanina,
Guru Pradhan,
by the chief of the Kurus.
chief of the Gurus,
Muni Pradhana,
Guru Pradhan,
the chief amongst the sages.
chief amongst the sages,
Pravridha,
Pravina,
sufficiently enriched. Harsha, satisfaction. Bhagavat, the personality of Godhead.
personality of Godhead,
Katayam, in the topics of Sanchodita, being so infused, come unto Vidura, Prahasan, with smiles,
smiles,
Eva,
Eva,
like that. Aha, replied. His translation, Sri Sukadev Goswami said, thus the chief of the sages, who was always enthusiastic about describing topics regarding the personality of Godhead, began to narrate the descriptive explanation of the Puranas. Being so infused by Vidura, he was very much enlivened by speaking on the transcendental activities of the Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada.
Right.
Great learned sages like Maitreya Muni are always very enthusiastic about describing the transcendental activities of the Lord. Maitreya Muni, being thus invited by Vidura to speak, appeared to be smiling because he actually felt transcendental bliss. Om Jnanatimmirandasya Gnanjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharni Devashesha Sunyavadi Paschacha Dusatai. Okay, good morning. Hare Krishna. We have Arjuna Prabhu online from Czech Republic, Anandini from Switzerland, Lakshmi Priya somewhere in Florida, I think, Melrose, probably. And here in person we have Bhaktidevan Prabhu, Nalini Kanta is here, Nalini Kanta Prabhu, Damayanti, Garuda, Hari Vallabha, welcome. Hare Krishna. Thanks for being here. Hari Vallabha just lives right down the street, like a few houses down this way. Kathleen is here, Rosa, here Govinda Prabhu, my name is Parampara Das. So I have some notes and I have a whole class we could talk about, but I'm wondering what's happening for you. Sometimes I come to classes and I have something happening for me, or like a topic or a question that I already have in mind when I come to a class, and then the class goes in a great auspicious place, but then I may think, oh, never mind, that question doesn't really fit here, or this discussion goes in a different way, maybe there's not time or whatever it is. I'm wondering if anybody's coming into this class, or maybe just so far what we read now, if anybody has any like question or topic or experience that's like burning for them or alive for them.
I'll share.
Yes.
So sometimes I come to spiritual programs and I think about like doing it right. So today I was really trying to connect with Krishna and open my heart and just invite Krishna to be in my heart.
Rather than try to do it right, do the program right, to this like let Krishna be in your heart.
Yeah, just inviting him in and just trying to be in myself and in connection with the divine.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
it. That's
Thank you
what's
for
on-
sure. I like that too. That sounds good. What would support that in this class?
Oh. Well, it's an internal process, I think, of just being with myself and connecting with Krishna more than feeling any kind of social pressure or that social, dynamic that goes on when you see people you haven't seen in a while, or you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I wonder what's happening for them, or how are they doing? Like that.
Having space to be internal, to be meditative in your process of Krishna in your heart, not like social pressure.
Something like that.
Thank you. Yes.
So- You told me you were in reading class yesterday, and I immediately said, "Yes, let's go." So I wanted to go. This morning you woke me up, and I wasn't expecting it. And then out of nowhere, you didn't even tell me. You just walked out of the room, and I was like, "Oh yeah, class." So when I came, I was ready, and I thought it was gonna go a lot differently. And
You're excited for class. I get that. You're excited for class. You're here. You're pumped. What are you looking forward to in this class? What would you like the opportunity to have happen in this class?
I have no idea.
Okay, no idea. You're open. Ready? All right. Anything else? All right. Yes, Rosa.
Discernment between transcendental bliss and maybe what would otherwise be called sentiment
Okay.
is a question.
The distinction between transcendental bliss, truly transcendental bliss, and something that may be just sentimental, like with the senses. Okay, nice. Thank you for that topic. Anything else you would like to share? Ask at this time.
So something that's churning for me is just grappling with how nothing happens without Krishna is allowing, like even a blade of grass doesn't move without Krishna's allowing, I would say condoning.
Yeah.
Like nothing happens without
He's permitting. He's not necessarily pleased by everything, but he's the Upajashtanamanta Bhakta Bhottamaya. He's the overseer and permitter.
Yeah. So I had kind of a wild night in some kind of Krishna consciousness and and just in the world, like wow, all these things happening, the jets and the things. Like, okay, so nothing's happening, Krishna's permitting. Wow. It's like so it's just kind of like, what does that mean?
The principle of like not even a blade of grass moves without Krishna's permission. Krishna's granting, allowing. It's alive for you because you're seeing some like wild stuff.
Yeah, even directly in the name of Krishna. Yeah.
Mhm.
It felt cringy.
Okay. Good.
That's the last night. So I'm just coming in with that.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Yes.
This is a question.
Question.
So related to what Bhakta Devin said.
Mhm.
So if Krishna tells every single blade of grass to move, to grow, or anything, why would he allow wars to happen, people dying?
It's a good question. Why allow wars if he's the permitter, the allower, everything? Why allow wars to happen? Here's some good questions. These are similar questions to the kind of questions that Vidura is asking in this chapter. Vidura is asking some questions like that. So we'll get into that. Good. We got some good topics. Anything else?
I'll check in before.
Yeah. What's happening for you? Hari Valava Prabhu?
Yeah, so recently I just haven't been making so much time for my personal spiritual practice. So when I come to like the temple for Parikata with some Maharaj and thing, I just kind of look for like inspiration like something that'll, you know, get me into like, oh yeah, this is great. I need to start, you know,
Some spark,
getting, yeah,
some
something
inspiration.
that'll catch fire and get me to
Okay.
like, okay, I want to chant also. I want to do this also.
Yeah, feeling like faded enthusiasm in your personal sadhana. So like looking for some spark.
Yeah.
All right. So we need to create a spark here today.
I think that's also maybe like a wrong expectation to come with the spiritual programs, because it's like, you know, I should just have that, but then it's like, maybe I'm just looking for that.
Yeah, okay. You're looking, is that the proper way to enter into a devotional program?
Yeah.
I look at that.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, I think that's in this verse, actually, in this verse, it goes there also because it's the power of association. Because Maitreya Muni is like he's inspired. They're both enlivened by the exchange. So like so okay, I'll talk about that. So yeah, who else would like a spark today in their personal sadhana?
I'll take some spark.
You take these all right, good. So we want to create some spark today. Okay, so yeah, this is the closing. Anandini, you want to share? Is
Yes, I also wanted to share something, and inspired by Nalini Kanta about why would God create war? We just here in Switzerland it's lunchtime, so we just had lunch, and we had some visitors, and the topic was war. We spoke about the war and how come some people really suffer during war and other people are protected during war. So I'm my thoughts are still in that question. And the discussion wasn't very peaceful. It became quite heaty, and so I'm glad to be in this environment now and here. Maybe you
Okay.
can speak about that.
Let's have that discussion. We'll have some discussion. Okay, I'll say a few words now. We can have more discussion.
No, I said I'm eager to hear.
Eager to hear.
Eager to hear now, to just be here and listen and
Listen. Okay.
yeah.
Yes, you've already had discussion. You've already had your discussion for today. Okay. All right. So yeah, this is the closing of chapter 7 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, of the Canto 3, closing of chapter 7. This is the last verse. And I looked it up. I think the last class I gave here was probably about a year ago. And we were still on this chapter a year ago.
We're not moving too far. We're not moving too.
So I think it was about a year to go through this chapter. There's been lots of classes on different books and different verses, but this is like a systematic study of the Bhagavatam going through. So it's a milestone whenever we reach the end of a chapter.
Yeah.
And
So we're doing about one chapter per year.
so lots happened in a year, related to Hari Vallabha's sharing. Like I felt some disenthusement in my personal spiritual practice. So it's auspicious to come back here a year later. Dear Govinda invited me to give class. I think he noticed me like walking around chanting more japa than usual. Like, oh, I think he's had some spark. I got some spark. So I'm gonna invite him to give class. So so I can relate with what you're sharing, Hari Vallabha Prabhu, for sure. And so this is the end of this chapter. And so I could ask, like, so we've gone through the chapter. What are your highlights from this chapter? But it's happened over a year and here and there. I'm sure we've all attended classes, well, many of us here have attended classes over the past year on this chapter. But I thought I'd just give an outline of this chapter. What's happening? So this is Vidura. Most of this chapter is Vidura asking questions. That's the title. Further inquiries by Vidura. Who knows who's Vidura? Who is Vidura? Who knows who's like? Anyone like who's Vidura?
The older brother of the 5 Pandus. half brother, I
He's
think.
like a half brother. Yeah, yeah. So he's he goes on a pilgrimage, and then he's like he gets kicked out. Really, he gets kicked out um, by he gets kicked out by the Kurus. There's a big battle happening. The Kurus versus the Pandavas. Kurus are like the bad guys, and the Pandavas are our good guys. Those are our heroes. And so Vidura, he's a good guy. He's a good guy, but he's with the Kurus. He's mixed up with the Kurus there, and he's actually trying to give some good advice. But he gets kicked out, and um, and so he goes on this like pilgrimage, and so he meets these sages. First, he meets Uddhava. We'll talk about Uddhava in a minute, but first he meets Uddhava, and then Uddhava directs him to Maitreya Rishi. So Vidura has been asking questions to Maitreya Rishi this whole chapter. Actually, the kind of the flow of the chapter is that Vidura asks some questions, and then Maitreya gives a response. It's like a clear response. Um, he answers his questions clearly, and then Vidura goes on to ask like a lot more questions and really detailed, very, very detailed questions about creation and the soul, illusion, karma, just the Lord. Yeah, so it's one of the most question-filled chapters in the entire Bhagavatam. So it's like how much these questions we already started with a few questions, how much these questions fuel the Bhagavatam, fuel spiritual life, these questionings, which questions can come from doubt. It can come from, just not fully understanding, but it can come from doubts and kind of maybe some cynicism or like, why? Hey, there's war happening. God's supposed to be all powerful, and so why does he stop the wars if he's all powerful? It can kind of come from that. Like, well, what's that? So that these questions spark further inspiration, and then the association. So like, Maitreya Rishi is, I mean, it's described here. He's the chief amongst the chief amongst the sages, the chief amongst the sages. So he's already enlivened. He doesn't need a spark necessarily in his spiritual life, but he gets a spark from Vidura's questions. Because being so infused by Vidura, that's the Sanchodita, being so infused. So Vidura infuses him with this like spiritual energy, transcendental bliss, actually, that he was actually experiencing transcendental bliss, which is distinct from some sentimentality. So sentimentality there has the senses in it. So it's coming from like the material senses, coming from some sort of pleasure or contact with the senses, with the sense objects. And then this is transcendental bliss. So it's coming from relishing these topics of the of Krishna, these spiritual topics. And so Vidura asks questions similar to that. Like, it's the classic question, like, why do people suffer? Like, if the soul is pure, how do we get mixed up in all this stuff? Like, if if the soul is pure and transcendental, then how come we get mixed up? Why do people suffer? Why? How does this soul get into the body, trapped in the cycle of birth and death? Why do we think we're the body, the illusion? How can we get free? The creation questions about creation. How do we get here? So God creates the world, but how does he get affected by it like we do? Because we're all enmeshed in an illusion. So does that happen for God too? But how does he stay aloof from his creation? And how does karma work? And how did the body and the senses and the soul all relate? And how is God in control but not stay aloof, not stay disconnected? How can we really understand him? So these really profound questions that he's asking. And so this is like one of the significant question and response, or actually questionings of the Bhagavatam. Vidura asking questions to Maitreya. So there's some other significant questionings in the Bhagavatam. Anyone think of anything that's other times of the Bhagavatam where there's some significant questions being asked to a personality? Yes.
He was talking to Krishna.
Arjuna, that's Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Krishna's asking questions. So yeah, so Arjuna's asking questions to Krishna. And then the Bhagavad Gita is, essentially Krishna's response to those doubts and those confusions. And yeah, from Arjuna. Nice. Anything else? Any
The
other?
very first chapter of Bhagavatam is entitled Questions by the Sages. And they ask 6 questions that unfold as the entire 18,000 verse Bhagavatam.
Yes, so these sages at Naimisharanya, they ask these questions, and that's this kind of the starting of the Bhagavatam. So Sutta Goswami is kind of arranged through a whole story. It's arranged to be the leader of the sages at Naimisharanya forest. It's like this 1,000-year sacrifice that's happening. So Sutta Goswami is the sages are asking questions to Sutta Goswami, and then so Sutta Goswami starts to respond to those questions, and in his response he references some other questions being asked to a great sage. Does anybody know who that is? Who those questions are to that particular sage? It's basically the whole Bhagavatam. Maharaj Parikshit. So in Sutta Goswami's responses, he brings up these questions like, well, these are some of the same kind of questions that are being brought up to whenever Maharaj Parikshit was preparing to leave his body. What happened to him that he was
like a
bed of errors? That's Bhishma Dev. That's another one. He's preparing to leave his body. That's a good one too, Bhishma Dev. But Maharaj Parikshit was he had a curse. He was gonna die in 7 days, bit by a snake specifically, and then snake bird. Yes.
Oh, wasn't he like he was like talking to some
It's a Brahmana. He's like a Brahmana boy that he was cursed by.
yeah, but no, but he was so since he was dying, or since he was gonna die, he was talking to can't remember his name, but
It starts with an S.
Sukadev
Sukadev Goswami. So he was also on the river. So Naimisharanya, they're in the forest. Naimisharanya, they're in the forest, but then on the banks of the Ganges, but actually kind of the Yamuna in some ways. So Maharaj Parikshit, King Parikshit's asking questions to Sukadev Goswami. And so Sukadev Goswami, in his responses, he says, oh, that's like these questions that were brought up by Vidura to Maitreya. So here was just like, we got 3 layers here of like where the questions lead to more questions, and to think about other times when other sages responded to these questions. So that's like living life according to wise teachings, right? To living life according to wise teachings. It's a way to live life of like, oh, well, let's answer these questions that we have through the prism of other great sages, and wise people that have already responded to these questions and already thought about these questions. Yeah, so that's where we're here. So this Vidura, so it all starts with Sutta Goswami and the sages, Naimisharanya, and then it goes to King Parikshit asking the questions to Sukadev Goswami. Sukadev, in his responses, he references this whole story and gets to Vidura asking these questions to Maitreya Rishi. And then, so we're coming to the end of these questions, and that now Maitreya is about to start responding in the next chapter, chapter 8. Maitreya Rishi is about to start responding. And then he'll be responding for like 26 chapters or something like that. So that'll be like 26 years.
26.
And so this is like a huge part. The biggest there's a few main kind of speakers and recipients. Sukadeva Goswami speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, that's like the Bhagavatam mostly. But then within that, the Maitreya speaking to Vidura is maybe the like second most respond, instructor to student responses in the Bhagavatam. Also, some other notable ones are Lord Kapila Dev to Devahuti, the teachings of Lord Kapila, which we're reading that. Actually, Malini has a reading group. We're reading that in there. And then there's Krishna speaking to our Uddhava, which is the Uddhava Gita later. And then there's also Narada Muni just scattered throughout Narada Muni. It's like instructing different times, like Vyasa, Dhruva, Prahlad, different times throughout. So this Maitreya Muni verse speaking to Vidura, responding to Vidura's questions is a huge part of the Bhagavatam, which we're just about to get started with. And
Actually gonna go on for another 57 chapters, because the whole fourth canto is also Maitreya.
he's still speaking. And so yeah, so you're like Nalini Kanta here goes to the temple on Wednesdays, part of school, and so they're in this. You're in Vidura's responses. They're chapter 15. So they're in that part of Vidura's responses. And I go to those. I hear those classes whenever he goes. I hear those classes, and then I'm in my personal reading. I'm in Canto 2, Chapter 9, which is also a lot of creation stuff. My Vidura's responses involve a lot of the story of creation. And so like I'm going to be in this for many years. My personal reading, if I go to the temple here, our Bhagavatam classes here, it's like I'll be in this section of Bhagavatam for a while, really absorbed. So I do read, yeah. Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. So yeah, so this verse, so yeah, the so Vidura's been asking all these questions. And then Sukadeva Goswami is describing this to Maharaj Parikshit. And he's describing this conversation between Vidura and Maitreya. And he says, thus the chief of the sages, who was always enthusiastic about describing topics regarding the personality of Godhead, began to narrate the descriptive explanation of the Puranas, being so infused by Vidura. He was very much enlivened by speaking on the transcendental activities of the Lord. So there's a way to get some spark to speak about the transcendental activities of the Lord, to speak about that. There's in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse 9, the English translation, the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So engaging in these conversations is naturally blissful and enlightening and satisfying. And so like that, even for the chief amongst the sages. So this was so there was, yes, Vidura asked questions. Maitreya Rishi was enthused by that and blissful in sharing his response. And then Vidura was so blissful in the response that he got from Maitreya that he asked so many more questions, one after the other. And then now here we are where Maitreya has received all these questions and he's going to start responding to them, and he's in transcendental bliss. In it's the power of association. So yeah, one of those questions that relates, one of those questions that Vidura asked to Maitreya Rishi about, like, yeah, how come? To me, it's related. Of like, yeah, how come if we're like pure and how come we ended up here all mixed up in all this suffering? How come we're suffering? And then also, it's related, like how come, you know, if God's all powerful, how come there's wars? How come there's bad things happening? And let's see, I'm looking back at the response, because already Maitreya did give a response. He's going to be responding to these further questions. Let's see, what verse was it where he's at, when he does give the response? Okay. So part of Maitreya's response that he already gave. Certain conditioned souls put forward the theory that the Supreme Brahman, or the personality of Godhead, is overcome by illusion or Maya, and at the same time they maintain that he is unconditioned. This is against all logic. So he's speaking about like the impersonalists. So there's impersonalists and there's like the personalists. So we're actually Vaishnavas, we're both, you know, transcendental to both categories. There's impersonal aspect and there's the personal aspect. But the impersonal aspect, the impersonalists say a theory that, yes, so that so there's three aspects to God: the impersonal Brahman effulgence, impersonal Brahman, and then there's God, that's like the oneness, undifferentiated oneness, and then there's God in the heart, Paramatma, that's seated next to us. There's Paramatma, this incarnation of God seated next to us in our heart, and then there's Bhagavan realization of the actual person, the supreme person of God. And so the impersonalists will say that, oh, well, if everything's one, so then like you're God and I'm God, everybody's God, then how is it that we're in illusion? So if that means that we're in illusion, that means God can become under illusion. So they put this, so it's a theory that they say he's unconditioned, so that there is some supreme pure spirit, but then it can become overcome by illusion or Maya. So this is against logic, is what it is.
So I've been thinking about this question for
Okay.
like the past 5 minutes, and
Yes.
I realized that whenever you go to Godhead, aren't you supposed to be all happiness and stuff? So then why would you desire to go back to Earth or to be God if you have God with you and no birth, death, old age, disease? Why would you desire to go back when you're already there?
That's a good, yeah, there's another related question. Yeah, but why do bad things happen to good people? Well, how come if we kind of know, we're full of knowledge, how come we suffer so much? Why does God let bad things happen, wars? And then, yeah, why, if we're like, why would we choose to suffer? Why would we choose to suffer if we have access to like full bliss, be with God, Krishna?
So why would we desire whenever we're already there? Like, shouldn't we just be free from that, from desire, because we already get whatever we want? Then why would we be like lining up Krishna would say like, okay, so where do you want to be, here, there, and then
Yeah, why would we choose to be away from Krishna? Why would we choose anything other than being with Krishna? Yeah, so yeah, Maitreya is starting to respond to that. So one thing is he makes a point that there's a difference between God and us. So he's making a difference, because there's some that think, oh, we're all God, all one, all oneness. But he's making a point, well, there's a difference, because it's not that there's everything's God, but then some parts of God become condition or become illusion and suffering in illusion, but then some parts don't. No, he's making a distinction that there's a distinction between us, the jiva soul, the spirit soul. He goes on. The living entity is in distress regarding his self-identity. He has no factual background, like a man who dreams that he sees his head cut off. So it's like a dream, right? So there's no factual background. We're thinking that we're the body. We become identified with the body. As the moon reflected on water appears to the seer to tremble due to the being associated with the quality of matter, so the self associated with matter appears to be qualified as matter. So we're thinking we're misidentifying with matter, with the body, and it's like, yeah, we're not seeing things clearly. We're not seeing things clearly. But that misconception of self-identity can be diminished gradually by the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, through the process of devotional service to the Lord in the mode of detachment. When the senses are satisfied in the seer supersoul, the personality of Godhead, and merge in him, all miseries are completely vanquished as after a sound sleep. Simply by chanting and hearing of the transcendental name, form, etc. of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one can achieve the cessation of unlimited miserable conditions. Therefore, what to speak of those who have attained attraction for serving the flavor of the dust of the Lord's lotus feet? So Maitreya begins to respond to those questions. So the foundational part is that there's a distinction between us and God, different categories. We're part and parcel of God, but at the same time, we're in different categories. And so, yeah, and that there's a different relationship. There's a different relationship. So yeah, so God is the all allower, permitter, nothing happens, all powerful. So why would he create a situation where we're away from him, we're suffering? So this comes to like the purpose of creation. What is the purpose of creation? What is the purpose of having of being here, of having all these souls in here? So the purpose is to increase Krishna's bliss, increase Krishna's transcendental bliss. And so so he could create that, okay, everybody, he's all powerful, so he could create that everyone is here, stays with God, that God could create that everyone stays with God and doesn't fall down, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't choose suffering, only has peace and bliss. And but then it wouldn't be as relishable, it wouldn't be as blissful if it was not from like a full choice. So the God gives the living entities free will. So he gives the living entities free will to make a choice. It's like our minute independence. We have some minute independence, and that's the difference between the jiva, us, and the supreme God. That he grants us some minute independence. And just like if you were to create like you could have AI, you could have ChatGPT just tell you like, I love you and I'm gonna serve you and I'm gonna do anything you want. And then, but it's like I'm controlling the AI to do that. I'm controlling ChatGPT. So it's not as relishable as if another person chooses to love me and serve me. It's not as relishable. It's not as real. Yes, what it.
If we get to choose in the spiritual world to come here, why can't we choose in the material world to go back to the spiritual world?
We do have a choice.
Yeah, but it's not like instant.
It's not instant. It's not. I'm understanding it's not instant either. the choice that we made to come to be away from Krishna. It's not an instant choice either. But yeah, we always have the choice. So
There's this kind of pretty well known video of Srila Prabhupada being lectured in Australia. And in the auditorium, Hare Krishna, in the auditorium, someone asks pretty much the question that Nalini asked, like, well, someone asked, how long does it take to become, fully Krishna conscious? And Srila Prabhupada responds, 1 moment. 1 moment. It can be instant, just a matter of choosing full surrender now. So at least philosophically, it's helpful to realize it can be instant. It's not instant because of my lack of sincerity. And that's fully acknowledged. We were just reading in some recent classes in the past week or two here in the purport to 4.10, Prabhupada writes, it's a slow process. In chapter 6, Krishna says, Shanai, Shanai, gradually, step by step. So for practically everyone, it is a gradual process. At the same time, it doesn't have to be so gradual. If I quadruple and increase by 1,000,000 times my sincerity, I could surrender immediately. And of course, then stay on that platform. So that's possible. But for most of us conditioned souls who came here because we want to be Krishna, we don't want to serve Krishna, it's a gradual process. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
That's another chat.
Yeah, so it could be instantaneous and any moment, and then that moment passes, and then we have another choice to make.
Yeah.
And so that's the maintenance, and that's the maintenance is, so perhaps even in like a Bhagavatam class or some kirtan, we can experience like some liberation. I feel like I'm in the spiritual world. I feel that spark. I feel that that connection. And then the challenge is to maintain that and to continue that choice. And so that's why I like this morning program is so relevant. Prabhupada gives so much structure for this. Yes.
Oh, you haven't talked about karma yet, so I'm curious about how karma plays a role in kind of slowing us down in this process of instantly getting into Godhead or full connection.
Karma, the role of karma in well, yeah, I think the karma is we karma is the result of our actions. So so once we are desiring with our free will something other than service, devotion and spiritual service to Krishna, then we get entangled in karma. We get entangled in karma with the reactions of our actions. And then but we say similarly, we can be free of our karma in the moment, in the instant. And then it's like how to maintain that. And so Nitya Gopal put in the chat, greediness and intensity. So the greediness and intensity for service. I think that's what he's referring to. That's the price that is need to pay to maintain it. So it's actually a spiritual greediness, a spiritual intensity that I want to serve. That this is what I want. So so this
Yesterday we had our chapter 4 Bhagavad Gita discussion with all the money and so many topics there. And one in chapter 4, there's the quintessential guru verse, Tadviti Pranipatina, Paripashyana Seve, Uptekshanti Tegan Ganinas Tadvarshana. Krishna describes that all the sacrifices result in transcendental knowledge, and by humbly approaching and serving and humbly questioning the pure devotee of Krishna, then we get that transcendental knowledge. And then in the verses that follow, particularly 4.37, Krishna responds to that question. He says, through full through full immersion in this bhakti, in this service mood, then karma is destroyed at the very root. And so that's actually the answer. And then as Parampara was nicely discussing, and like if we're absorbed in this Bhagavatam or Kirtan, we're absorbed in chanting, or like that, we're absorbed in serving the deities, we're absorbed in, then we're free from karma. Okay.
100% free, like in the moment, or just
Yep.
more time, more karma, like previous lives, we built lots of karma, and
Yeah.
then this life.
Yeah, that's it. So all those previous lives could be trillions of lives. And by giving ourselves to, this isn't my opinion, it's Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4. By giving ourselves to bhakti, if we're like fully giving, 108%, karma is burnt to a crisp, and it's described. There's manifest karma, like this body, we can call this is our fossilized karma. This is the result of the karma I created in this life and previous. Okay, but then there's karma in seed form, there's karma in apar, there's karma that's not manifest. Yeah, very layered and intricate. And bhakti just pulls it up at the root completely. Yes, yes, yes. That's Bhagavad Gita. Okay, and then to stay steady on that platform, that requires that requires that requires quite some sincerity that we don't then go back to habits that create more karma. Hare Krishna. But bhakti is very, very powerful, and that's an understatement.
So is there any math, like if you have lots of karma in the past, you need to do more bhakti yoga? Is there math in there? You know what I'm saying? Or do you think just be absolutely sincere?
I appreciate the mathematical.
Be absolutely sincere, and no matter what you have in there, it's just going to be purified.
Yeah, it's not so much about more, it's about pure some whatever, whether this is just for a lifetime or two, or 2 trillion lifetimes, and as worms and cockroaches, things like that. Bhakti, just we're sincere, and as deep as our material conditioning goes, and like lots of therapists and coaches and facilitators here, the psychophysical nature, as deep as our material conditioning goes, so deep like that, the bhakti of the soul goes much deeper. We connect with that, we live from that, and the material karma is destroyed. And it's true. And it's true. We've all had experience of that. Then to stay steady, and so that to not create more karma and to not reconnect with the machine of karma that we created for this lifetime, that requires generally the gradual process, sadhana, strong morning program. That's the Greek says strong morning program, fulfilling our commitment to chant japa. Then we don't, because we could be free from the whole machine of material energy and karma, yantra udani maya. At the same time, we're also free to reconnect with it. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, I just wanted to add to that my understanding is, I don't know if it's adding a question, but my understanding is that the karma isn't immediately destroyed, but it could be, I guess is what you're saying. And I understood that our karma, so if we're disconnected from God, well, we're always connected to God. We're part and parcel of God, but if we're disconnected from the bhakti yoga process and serving, loving God and purifying, doing self-realization and living within God's, rules and regulations presented by the spiritual master. If we're disconnected from that process, we are on the machine of material energy, and we are in the accumulating good in our karma and living out, dealing with that, all the contact. But then when we start to practice, my understanding is that I've heard that it becomes Krishna's karma, and he actually takes charge of it, and so he could destroy, he could intensify it, there'd be more suffering, he could reduce it, and that there's more bliss, but as far as the experience of the soul, it's good if no matter what, if Krishna is taking more charge over our karma, because he knows how to move the soul forward, even if it's to create suffering, bliss, or
Nitya says something about, Nitya said, Krishna uses karma after surrender to increase surrender.
Yeah, that's what you're speaking.
Yeah, so I don't know if that contradicts what
No,
you're saying.
it doesn't contradict, it's a different scenario. It's a different scenario and they all have the validity. The scenario you're talking about, yeah, well, one thing is that in the fifth canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, the story of Bharat Maharaj, he's the one he was a pure devotee, but he got kind of sentimentally attached to a poor deer and this and that. And then he was looking for the deer, fell and hit his head and left his body, became a deer, but he was a deer who was attracted to the sages and like that. So it's many chapters in the fifth canto. So Srila Prabhupada and Shukadeva Goswami described there. So was it his karma? So it was his karma, but it wasn't. So it wasn't like the machine of karma. Krishna was using his karma to bring him closer. And Srila Prabhupada used that principle in relation to himself. We don't see it that way, but in his humility, Srila Prabhupada quotes a verse from the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, Yasyaham Abhigrinami Harishi Tatinam Shinai. That if Krishna sees there's a sincere devotee, but still with material attachments, he'll use the karma to he'll create difficulties to deepen the devotee surrender. Srila Prabhupada said that he had many opportunities to be like a multi-billionaire, to like really be a business magnate. And this due to different circumstances, it didn't quite work. Because Prabhupada's his conception was, well, yeah, and I'll use all the money for Lord Chaitanya's movement. But it didn't quite work. So then he took sannyas and Srila Prabhupada said that, okay, I had these opportunities, that was my karma, but then Krishna arranged it this way just to deepen my surrender, that like that. So that's one possible scenario. It's one possible scenario.
And then another one is what you described, that that karma is destroyed.
Karma is destroyed, and then Krishna's, and then we're having our personal relationship with Krishna, not related to the karma. Okay, so like there's just being a slave on the machine of karma. There's karma is destroyed, and it's personal spontaneous play of love of God in personal relationship. And then there's we're not attached to the machine anymore, but Krishna uses the machine to help us along, sometimes in very stretchy ways. Different scenarios.
I would like to just, I don't know if it's a question or just something that stood out to me was you expressed sincerity, you know, in our bhakti, you know, and I was thinking about like, yeah, we could just go through the motions and do bhakti.
Yeah.
Without that sincerity, or like to what degree the sincerity, like how does one really be sincerely connected to sincerity within themselves, you know, and you know, it's, you know, looking at like other motivations for doing bhakti and so many different motivations, but yeah, like, you know, like what is that process for each individual to really like be clear on their sincerity? Again, like how does one support themselves to like stay connected to that and not like drift off and like all of a sudden like, you know, now I'm in a place where I'm doing bhakti, I'm going through the bhakti process, but I'm lost in some other, you know, maybe to fulfill unworthiness or whatever, you know, I want to be something, or, you know, I guess I want, yeah, because maybe you could speak to that a little bit. To how does one like stay like, you know, connected to that, I guess, and not drift off.
Well, programs like this, I mean, that's like a major pillar in the whole process given to us by Srila Prabhupada is sadhu sangha. Is sadhu sangha, or you know,
It doesn't have to be in Orlando either, in a hotel
Doesn't need to be. But that's one possible example. So, right, so, and then, yeah, because we have our workshops or seminars, and that the idea is like, we're surrounded, we're putting ourselves in an environment with others who are like sincere to see their insincerity, or ready to be authentic about my inauthenticities. And then we all have blind spots. In conditioned life, we have blind spots, so we surround ourselves with true friends who are ready to caringly help us see, kind of like, that kind of seems kind of like, it seems to be a lot of self-deception there. And so that's like true friendship, and that's where the sadhu sangha pillar, you know, a coach, a community that truly values giving and receiving honest feedback, helping us to see ourselves. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I appreciate that, yeah. Yeah, surrounding ourselves with individuals that are taking a stand for, you know, our highest good, which may be really challenging to hear, you know, feedback and even inviting the feedback when it's not being given as well, is what I'm hearing. Yeah, to be proactive in that process. Yeah, not only as an individual, but be surrounded by individuals that are proactively giving that.
I'm curious also, like what comes to me is like asking Krishna to help us be sincere, like praying for it.
Yeah,
Because you know,
Nice,
we're not
yeah.
just all on our own trying to, you know,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
it's like a cycle. We
To
have
be in that prayer or that question on a
Mhm.
regular basis.
Thanks.
Yeah, to ask for it. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ken.
Mhm.
A few weeks ago, Bhakti Rose and I, we drilled on it's one of the seed verses of Bhagavad Gita, and just Krishna's talking about what you just talked about. Say samsa tatyatanam ajitam akti purvakam takami puri yodutam yenamam upyantite. Krishna says, if one is sincere, I'll give the intelligence by which they can come to me. And so like, including sincere to see where all my shadow stuff, and please Krishna reveal that, let me pull those weeds. And that's the key component. Thank you.
Nichagopal has his hand raised. Hare Krishna. You want to share something, Nichagopal? Yeah.
Hare Krishna, I'm just appreciating all this beautiful conversation around karma, and somehow it's been my very favorite topic to discuss about. I just couldn't help myself just to share some bit of a realization I had recently about the topic karma. So I was thinking why Krishna doesn't remove the karma when we start becoming his devotee. The thing, because I was struggling by myself that why Krishna is not removing this karma, that karma, why I still have to suffer because of that, and this kind of a questioning I was having about the whole issue. So what I was praying to Prabhupada, and somehow something struck with me, and that was, if Krishna removes my karma without full surrender, without 100%, 108% surrender, then it would be like injustice to my previous desire what I had. I had certain desire in my previous lifetimes, and because of that, I created a certain kind of a karma to fulfill those desires. So if just Krishna removes that karma, if Krishna remove that facility to fulfill that particular desire, then the choice is not being given to give up that desire. So unless we give up that desire completely, the surrender is not complete. That is one aspect of it I was contemplating. The second was that was about positive karma, that a facility to fulfill my desire. And second part of karma is the pain, the challenges, the difficulties. That is resulting from a bad choices what we had made. And that was because of some wrong, faulty thinking about spiritual life, about my own self, what has deeply embedded in me, which forced me to indulge into some sinful activities, which is like a bad karma now. So now, unless I remove that faulty thinking, unless I remove that wrong paradigm about life, about myself, about the human being around me, till that lesson is learned, there is no use of removing that karma, because you'll keep repeating same mistake and again keep on getting indulged into same kind of a karma. So that was the two things. Unless so Krishna sometimes uses my own karma to fulfill the to kind of make me more surrendered and to kind of make me more pure in that way. Just wanted to share a bit of understanding.
Thank you. It's a good compliment. Yes, yes, this relates, yeah, the personal aspect of it. So Krishna's like the father, Krishna's like the father, and that we have these desires, and then he's facilitating them. He's facilitating them. So a question would be, rather than like, well, why does God allow these things to happen? It's like, why are we desiring these things to happen? That's a more personal question, is that because it's a reciprocation, fulfilling of our desires. And sometimes we may think, we may see someone who's like suffering some bad result, and we say, well, he doesn't, that person doesn't, they don't deserve that. They don't deserve that result. They don't deserve that. They certainly they couldn't have been desiring that. But then it's described that we're like seeing just a portion of the movie. Like if you just come in, and the movie's already been playing for 30 minutes, and you just come in and start watching the movie, you'd be like, what's happening here? This doesn't make any sense. Or if you come into the courtroom and all you see is the judge giving the sentence. You have life in prison. Like, this is not fair. He's getting life in prison. What did you do? We missed everything that was happening in the courtroom before. So so we're only seeing a little slice of the movie. And sometimes there's a happy ending, It seems like there's a lot going on now, but we don't get to see the end of the movie. So there could be, for that living entity, there could be a happy ending. So there's this so yeah, a more personal question would be like, and there's philosophical reasons. It's like, okay, we because we want to be like God. We want to be like God. So that's like we desire to be separate. And Krishna grants some minute independence. Okay, you want to have your own God project. You want to be like God. Well, here you are. So Krishna grants what we want, our desires, in a way where there's still some strings attached that can bring us back to Him. It's just like a father may say, okay, you want to go for this thing? Okay, well, here's the conditions in which you can go for it, and creates a situation in which hopefully there's can be a lesson that's learned. I appreciate what Mr. Gopal was sharing about like the purification aspect, and like the yeah, that if Krishna just removes the karma, just like the father may just remove all the barriers, and then like the child doesn't get the lesson, doesn't learn the what's there to be learned. So Krishna, there's some purification to happen, and there's a variety too. This is a personalism. So there's that it's we are all one, but there's simultaneously oneness and different. There's a variegatedness and a diversity. So in that diversity, there's going to be conflicts. There's going to be conflicts in that diversity. And I actually just heard this devotee was speaking, and oh, because there's some belief like, oh, there shouldn't be conflicts, like even in like spiritual communities there shouldn't be conflicts, or there shouldn't be conflicts in like different understandings about spiritual topics that shouldn't be there. But that's kind of an expectation. That's kind of it's not really the reality that, and it's even described like in the spiritual world. There's some conflicts. There's some disagreements. Like Mother Yashoda, Mother Yashoda's. There's conflicts. People,
There's different camps of gopis.
Yeah, so this is part of the spiritual variegatedness, and then it becomes it becomes perverse and mundane and contaminated in another way, just like the love of God in the spiritual world, in the material world, becomes lust and greed, and I'll just get whatever I want. There's a perverted, kind of degraded form of everything that's in the spiritual world. And the last thing I'll say for now is that well, now I lost it, but I was talking about the variegatedness, the lessons to learn, spiritual topics.
Concept of no conflict.
no conflict, yeah.
I'm appreciating Parampara that you brought it to the personal. We can certainly go into why is there war in the world? Well, it's kind of easy to ask that question. Why is there senseless violence? It's kind of easy to ask that. But then, like where your comments go is like, all right, so where and how am I contributing to violence? Where am I, perhaps subtly, but where am I being violent to myself, to others in different ways? Maybe physical, maybe emotional, maybe mental. Okay, so yeah, Krishna gives us independence. And so where are we using that independence in a way that it's not all about me just choosing love and peace. I mean, maybe some in this room or online are like that, but it's very productive for me to look at, yeah, how am I contributing to the violence? And then I could get to see, oh, that's the source of war. It's not Krishna, it's decisions like this.
With the minute, that's where I was going to go, something like that.
Yeah.
The minute independence, then we have some free will, and so then yeah, this whole material world is reciprocation of our of what's happening for us in a subtle level, that of our desires and what we want, and so there can be a philosophical reason to look at like, okay, how come I'm in this suffering, and how come there's suffering happen? There's a philosophical answer. Also, even with like sincerity, like, okay, my level of sincerity can look at like philosophically, and then there's personal responses to that also, like very personal. That's the process, self-reflection can be supportive in that, to like, yeah, what are my personal, because there's so much diversity. I think that's where I was going. There's so much diversity and variegatedness. So there's kind of a philosophical response, and then there's our personal decision and personal reasons. Yeah, what is it for me that I'm attached to this suffering, and rather than like, going in, surrendering to God, and maybe like choosing, maybe violence. What part of me is like contributing to violence, or allowing violence, or wanting violence, or whatever it may be. And then with sincerity also, there's so many rules and regulations, and then the essential rule and regulation is to accept whatever is favorable for devotional service, and for increasing sincerity, or for remembering God, for not choosing suffering, to accept whatever is favorable and to reject whatever is not favorable. So in that way, so that I thought of that with increasing sincerity. So I actually thought of this like humorous example. I thought it was humorous. It's like, I kind of had situations like this in life a little bit, but like, say I just have some random conversation with someone that I like look up to and respect, and then like then maybe they say something, they say like, oh yeah, I never eat at restaurants or something. And I'll just be like, whoa, he never eats at restaurants. I'm gonna be like that. And I'm like, so I come home, I'm like, all right, we're not eating restaurants anymore because I saw this Prabhu, and I'm not saying that, we don't even say that, but so this Prabhu. And then like later I could go talk to that Prabhu, and he's like, oh no, I wasn't serious about it. I eat restaurants all the time. But for like years, I've been not eating restaurants because of this Prabhu. So it's like, so what, was that good or bad or what? It's like, what if it's favorable, then just accept it, whatever's favorable. It wasn't even true. It was based on some illusion or whatever, but still it was favorable, for devotional service or whatever. So yeah, accept whatever is favorable, reject whatever is not favorable, and then at the same time, it's not to whimsically neglect rules and regulations that can be favorable. And so Srila Prabhupada did give some groundwork, some ground rules, some basic rules and regulations, specifically and we talked about this in the men's retreat. We talked about that when we were around the fire, we talked about it a little bit, like that there's rules and regulations, the 4 regulative principles: no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling. And so it seems like a lot of negation, but it's actually there's virtues. They're virtuous. They're virtuous rules. Actually, somebody was sharing in the men's retreat that like he's appreciating like some devotees and being in like programs run by them or just association because and compared to like other association other programs run by different sort of people or whatever and because he could see there was like a virtuousness, there was some virtuousness, and I was like, well, I think that comes back to Srila Prabhupada's 4 regulative principles. And because it seems, yeah, those support us in connecting with virtues, so like with the I can remember these this time. So the no meat eating that connects us with the virtue of compassion. Compassion. Compassion for all living beings, not just other humans or different, maybe certain sections of humans. So all living beings, compassion, the virtue. And then the illicit sex, no illicit sex, that is a virtue of cleanliness that and in society also there's lots of things can be cleaned up in society by that. Only have sex inside of marriage, ideally for procreation. So many problems come from you know, sex outside of marriage, many marriages or different children, this whatever. So and then there's no gambling, which actually connects us with the virtue of truthfulness, being honest, making an honest living, living honestly. And then what's the other one? No intoxication, which is austerity. That's what I couldn't remember. So yes, that's an austerity. So this austerity gives actual strength. The austerity gives strength to our spiritual life. So those are the 4 regular principles. And then the ultimate positive one is the chanting at least 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And yes, can support, there's one of those rules and regulations that can support us that we don't want to whimsically neglect. Did you want to say something, Rosa?
Conversation inspires me to share during Lord and Sugar Day's Appearance Day celebration at Naveen and Mahadi's home. I had shared that I was struggling with a consideration of desire for Krishna because I felt it was selfish. Like in going towards Krishna, it is not for sheer care, it is for the desire of more peacefulness, it's for the desire of more tolerance and compassion and greater association and all of the comforts that I'm getting in my experience. So I've been thinking about that, and this inspired me to think about a book I'm reading, and I'm going to relate it. I'm going to read something very briefly, and I'm going to speak on something that Prabhupada said. The book is called The Reasons of Love by Harry G. Frankfurt. Just a brief thing here. It says, the most basic and essential question for a person to raise about the conduct of his or her life is not what he or she should care about, but what, in fact, he or she cannot help caring about. The most important form of caring, Frankfurt writes, is love, a non-voluntary, disinterested concern for the flourishing of what is loved. Love is so important because meaningful, practical reasoning must be grounded in ends that we do not seek only to attain other ends. And because it is in loving that we become bound to final ends desired for their own sakes. So there's a lot there. And what it means to me just in this moment is we were reading, I think it was verse 10:10 the other day about love. And in the purport, David was talking to us about how love is both a feeling and a verb. And to be loving is to take the action of the verb, even if we don't feel the feeling present within ourselves. And that really resonated with me, and something that Frankfurt is writing about that I'm thinking about is the difference between the desire and care. So what he was writing about in the book that I've been thinking is that we can desire things and not care about them. So like I vaguely want an ice cream. Do I care about that? No, not really, right? To care, like he was saying here, desiring something for its own sake. And so to choose loving action, I'm associating that with that. It is to care for something for its own sake, even in the absence of the loving feeling.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhakti Rosa. We'll close there with that. Caring, distinction between caring and desiring. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Thanks, Prabhu. Thanks for joining us. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol. Thank you, Naresh Prabhu.